This podcast was brought to you by Outsider. Check us out at www.outsider.com. Outsider is an outdoor lifestyle brand owned and operated by me, retired Navy SEAL Sam Mackey, and my dear friend and former NFL quarterback Jay Cutler. At Outsider, we encourage everyone to get outside and enjoy all that life has to offer. Head over to outsider.com to check out our unique patent-pending drinkware. Outsider's drinkware can be customized with your personal or business logo. Go to outsider.com, upload your logo, and we will send you visual proofs and great wholesale pricing. And don't forget, get outside and enjoy all that life has to offer. All right, ladies and gentlemen, welcome to the next episode of the Outsider Podcast. Today, our guest is an Army veteran, an author and bestseller of numerous books, and co-host of Fox and Friends on the Weekend, Pete Hegseth. Thanks for coming
What's
on,
up,
man.
Thanks for having me.
Yes,
Appreciate it.
sir. And we're here to talk about his new book, The War on Warriors, which is, very interesting because I think that title and book has to be written from a very particular lens, and I'm excited to hear all about it. But I'd like to start with just, where you grew up and what made you want to join the military and so on and so forth.
Well, I appreciate the opportunity. You got a nice spot here.
Thank you, sir.
Great. I didn't grow up in a political family or a military family. I didn't know the difference between the Army and the Marine Corps. But they worked hard, loved the Lord, loved the country. And we used to go to Memorial Day and 4th of July parades in a small southern Minnesota farming town. And I just remember watching that. It was a blink if you miss it kind of parade. It was like, the fire truck, the sheriff, the band, and then the vets. Mm-hmm. But the whole town revered those guys. And I just remember thinking as a kid, year after year, like, man, they must have done something legit. These are World War II vets, Korean War vets, Vietnam vets, Gulf War guys were maybe just back. And I didn't know anything about it. But I thought, man, if they can do that, I'd like to do something like that someday. And I did. I almost went to West Point, but instead I did ROTC and signed up a couple of months before 9/11, actually, and did a National Guard officer contract. 9/11 happened, then we all knew we were in for something, and did branched infantry and went to infantry officer basic at Fort Benning. May that name rest in peace.
Now,
but then we can go from there.
When you're on your ROTC program, when do you choose, what MOS do you have? I don't know if, do you call it MOS for officers even in the Army? Okay.
Yeah.
So at what point do you choose your MOS and what made you choose infantry?
So you go to, in between your junior and senior year, you go to what's called advanced camp. Okay. Or it's a lame name, but out at Fort Lewis in Washington, everybody go to advanced camp. Do you have fun at camp? And I did well. I think I was first. I know I was first in my class of my group, which the higher you graduate out of that, combined with your rank in the structure of your ROTC unit, gives you preference in your pick. So I just knew that, hey, if I'm going to do this, I'd like to lead men in combat in an infantry scenario, and that's what happened. Okay.
And then the towers fell. Did you get activated right away, or how's that work after school?
Well, I had a National Guard contract coming out. So I actually went to work at Bear Stearns, an investment bank, following the herd of everybody else that went to Wall Street to do stuff, and realized quickly that was not for me. But my unit got mobilized. My National Guard unit got mobilized to Guantanamo Bay, Cuba for a year. From 2004 to 2005.
Really?
It was the longest year of my life. So there were 700 dudes there, Islamists. Yeah. And we were babysitting them for a year.
At the prison there?
At the prison.
Okay.
Yeah.
And is that the same prison that, got in a little bit of a pickle years later?
Well, it got in a pickle, but that was the other one people think of as Abu Ghraib.
Yeah, that's what I was thinking of.
That's in Iraq.
Yep. Okay.
But, Gitmo got this bad rap because they had black sites. They had the waterboarding going on early on. Well, because they were trying to get intelligence from these guys that were off the battlefield to figure out what was going to happen next. Yeah. But by the time we got there, it was pretty settled. But these guys were nasty. Yeah. And Guantanamo Bay is a naval base in just 90 miles south of Florida. Like if you're in the Navy, you go there. It's a good duty station. You got your family there. You got church. Well, we're 90 miles from Florida, living in tin cans on the other side of the island without, paying $1.25 an hour to call home like we're in Afghanistan.
Yep.
And you could drink beer, which was both good but also bad as a leader because managing these guys, it was something.
Idle hands.
That's right.
What year was that?
That was 2004 to 2005.
Okay. And after that, you go back to work?
After that, I went back to Bear Stearns for a couple of months.
Mm-hmm.
And I just remember sitting on the trading floor, looking up at whatever we were watching, CNBC or whatever, and seeing the Iraq war heating up.
Yep.
And just saying, what the fuck am I doing here?
Mm-hmm.
Like, I'm a qualified guy. Our nation's at war. I don't know if it's going well or not, but I should be a part of it.
Mm-hmm.
And you'll appreciate the difficulty of this. Like, I was in the National Guard, recently returned, and I knew one guy. He was my platoon trainer at Infantry Officer Basic Course. So the guy who trained me to be an infantry officer was now a company commander at the 101st Airborne. Mm-hmm. And they were leaving in like 12 weeks or whatever, 8 weeks, 12 weeks to go. And they needed a platoon leader. I emailed him out of the blue. I said, sir, is there any chance you need anybody? And I'm thinking 15 minutes or whatever later, I hear back, hey, actually, I need a second platoon leader. If you can get here, I want you.
Really?
It was like, how the hell do I do this? Fighting the bureaucracy of the Pentagon.
Yeah.
So over about a month of just battling my National Guard and the active duty, I went and visited Fort Campbell, got the blessing of the battalion commander, the brigade commander. The brigade commander was Mike Steele of Black Hawk Down fame. And it finally got there. And there was a final moment where it's just right hand wouldn't touch left hand. Big Pentagon, big Army, wouldn't happen. And a general kind of chimed in for me. And I'll never forget, I got a call from some colonel in the Pentagon. He's like, I don't know who the fuck you think you are or who you know, but don't fuck this up because you've just got orders to go to the 101st. And so I showed up as a non-Ranger qualified, one tour in Guantanamo Bay, National Guard, Ivy League graduate, Wall Street punk. Imagine how proud my platoon was.
Welcome with open arms,
yeah,
I'm sure.
Can't wait for Lieutenant Hegseth to get here. So there was a lot of...
This fucking cake eater's going to kill us all.
Oh, 100%. This John Kerry wannabe just showed up. And so I knew I had a lot. So you lean on your NCOs. You lean on the senior enlisted who sort of showed me the ranks. And I did about a month. I think it was about a month at Campbell and then a month-ish at Kuwait. And sure enough, pretty soon we were in Iraq and I was leading the platoon.
Where'd you push in from when you left Kuwait? Where'd you go?
We went to Fob Falcon, which is in East Rashid. It's in sort of south-ish Baghdad.
Yep.
Not a great spot. And when we got there, there was actually, if you remember, there were a lot of National Guard units that were holding ground at that point because they were rotating through. So there was a National Guard unit owning our battle space, and they were just getting chewed up.
How long was that deployment?
That was a year.
Okay. I remember my brother, he was in the National Guard, and he did, I think, 2 15-month deployments and then a year-long deployment.
Yeah.
And that's a stint.
Oh,
That's
because you get the
time.
train up, because the National Guard units aren't ready. So you have 3 to 6 month train up, depending. I know a unit who was there, did a 2-year deployment because they did a 6-month train up. They did 12 years in country and then 12 months in country. And then they got extended for 6 months because of a shortfall. I mean, it was a mess.
What was your guys' equipment like? So it was 04?
05, 06 now.
05, 06. Oh, yeah. So the height of the war.
Yep.
And what's your rifles look like, your body armor? What were you guys dealing with?
That's a great set of questions there. So we had just transitioned from 16 to M4.
Okay.
And not all the M4s were collapsible. So you knew you were in a real trigger pulling position when you had the new M4.
Yeah.
And you were probably a headquarters weenie if you had the M16. Yep. So halfway through the first part of my tour, I had an M4. Then my platoon leader time was up, so I went to be the S5, which is I was the liaison to the local Iraqi government, which is a whole nother story. And they handed me an M16. I'm like, what the hell is this? Paperweight. And then I finally made a drug deal and got an M4 back. We were light infantry. The Roxans were light infantry at the 101st. But we found out in Kuwait that we were, everyone gets around on Humvees.
Yeah.
And then they were 11-14s at that point. And so we had to quickly sort of think through what what does mechanized infantry look like, and how do you mounting, dismounting, react to contact on a small or an ambush. Things we hadn't really worked on.
Okay, so prior to this point, you haven't done any mobility training with Humvees?
Not really. I mean, the unit maybe had done some before I got there.
Yeah.
Because it's part of maybe the rotation of training, but by the end, all we were doing is shoot houses.
Yeah.
We were refining door-to-door, house-to-house stuff, CQB. So that was when we and air assault sort of procedures. In Kuwait, we did more of that, and then we found out once we realized where we were going. Hey, it's all Humvees everywhere.
Were you guys
prepared for that?
Rolling thin skin with no doors, or
no? We were up armored at that point.
Okay, good.
They had gone through the exercise. There were a lot of
thin skin means no armor.
I was gonna say we're gonna need like a legend on the side of this thing just for all the code words.
It's true, because as Rumsfeld said at the beginning of the war, you go to war with the army you have, not the army you want. And so we had a lot of units rolling in no doors or lightly armored. At our point, it was the armorers or the I don't even know who it would have been. The loggies were finding whatever steel they could, and they're just all over it, which of course the suspension can't hold. So you got trucks breaking down all over the place. But there was always a new kit, every 3 months or 6 months that was getting pushed out to get put on the sides of the Humvees.
And IEDs weren't that big of a threat then, were they?
They were beginning to be, absolutely.
Okay.
Yeah.
All right.
It was a lot of it was what was it? Whatever the caliber is of but just roadside old artillery
rounds.
Shells. Yeah. That's mostly what it was.
Were they making any EFPs yet or anything?
EFPs were new.
So EFP.
EFP is a shape charge, a homemade shape charge. What's a shape charge? If you put C4 in a martini glass and or put it like a piece of copper down in the bottom of the martini glass, that'll work too. But mainly they use copper in the shape of a martini glass. When that bomb goes off, it turns that glass and or that copper into a projectile that is melted steel that'll go through anything.
Gotcha.
So armor won't stop it.
Jeez.
Yeah.
Yeah, and where does it come from? The Iranians, for the most part. So the Iranians are
nasty.
Yeah, they're and they got all the money in the world to help push the information down to the grunts who wouldn't otherwise know how to make that stuff.
So I saw or read somewhere that you mentioned that you pretty much got forced out of the military because they called you an extremist. Has that narrative started at this point in 04, 05?
Oh, no.
Okay,
not even close. I mean, this is 05, 06 in Iraq as a platoon leader or working. I was in civil, so I did civil military relations. Remember when the Golden Dome was bombed in Iraq? There was this famous Shia shrine that started a lot of the civil war inside Iraq. It was my second day on the job, being the liaison to the local Iraqi government in Samarra. We moved from Baghdad up to Samarra halfway through our tour. And so we were just, like anybody else, trying to figure out what kind of war is this? What is this counterinsurgency thing? Would it actually work? Should we do it? How kinetic should we be? Can you kill your way out of defeating this enemy or not? Like, there was just a lot of earnest, good effort, but confusion about how we execute this thing, and differences of opinion about that. So I say that to say that no one was thinking about politics. Not at all. I couldn't tell you what. In fact, when politics came up, I mean, I was a politics major in college and was involved in some of that stuff. People were like, "Shut the fuck!" Like, it's not about. None of this is about politics. No, people had opinions about the war. Like, is the war any good or not? Should we be here? What are we doing? But the idea of extremists, the only extremists we saw were the dudes blowing themselves up, trying to kill us.
Yeah. Were they? Was that about the time they were trying to implement voting in Baghdad?
Yep. So we helped secure one of the first elections in Baghdad before we went up to Samarra, and also down in Samarra. Yeah.
Now, could you tell us a little bit about the red paint or the red they put on their fingers?
The purple finger.
That was it. Yeah.
I actually think we should do it here in the States. I think it's a great idea.
So I was not there at this time. Could you tell Jay and our listeners a little bit about that and why the purple fingers and everything?
Yeah, I mean, if you haven't held many elections and it's not part of your ethos, how do you ensure that it's one man vote, or one man and one woman, kind of, and one vote. And, it's not something we would have thought of. It also became a source of pride. It's like, here's a demonstration. So you cast your vote, you hand in your ballot, you dip your finger in ink, which can't be removed for at least a couple of days, which means if someone's come in the polling station or not. It's pretty straightforward. And then it became a symbol of defiance. And of course, the insurgents tried to attack all these polling stations and intimidate people from voting. Being there in that moment, it was inspiring to see. Now, in retrospect, you realize, well, this was never a system that was actually going to work. But yeah, I would love to see every American dipping their finger in blue ink on election day.
Simple.
We should go back to paper ballots, electric ballots. You can't follow it, and you think, oh, bloop. We know who won.
My brother was deployed at that time, and similar job. I'm sure he was infantry and in the National Guard. And I remember him sending pictures or seeing pictures and news articles of everyone holding up their fingers. Yeah. And then also remember hearing about the insurgents blowing up bridges or doing anything they can to stop people from going to vote. So very, very interesting. Very interesting take on how they decided who voted or not. Right.
I love it.
Decent method. So
it's better than what we have now.
Yeah,
it sure is. They all voted on one day, and we know exactly who voted.
Yeah.
How about we try that?
Makes a lot of sense. When you break it down like that.
So after that deployment, what happened after that deployment?
I came back, tried to realize I have no interest in being involved in finance. And then I worked for a think tank briefly for a second, and then I ran into a Marine who had run a group called Vets for Freedom, and it was a Iraq and Afghanistan war vets organization that was focused on basically saying, hey, let's give the warfighters what they need to win. Our view at that point was, listen, we fought for something, it's not popular, but we believe in it. Let's support them. And that's about the time the surge came around. So I found myself quite quickly going from a soldier who, and because I was in the National Guard, activated to serve with the 101st Airborne, an active duty unit. When we came back, like after I demobbed, I was back to New York City within a week.
Really?
So it's like you go from being in combat to being in a Manhattan apartment, and you're like, what the hell am I doing?
What was that transition like after a year?
It was not fruitful.
Yeah.
Do you know what I mean? Like anybody else, you sort of deny what you're processing.
Yeah.
And it just, for me, it devolved into just a lot of day drinking and just stupidity because I never had a moment to really process it, and I wasn't decompressing with guys that I've been there with.
Yeah.
It's just friends would be like, what was that like, man? It's like, so I threw myself into work as much as I could, and part of it was this vets organization. A Marine had run it. He'd done a great job with it, but he was ready to work on Wall Street, and he kind of handed me the keys and the website password, and he'd had success and built something. And I said, I'll do this. And pretty soon I found myself on TV defending the Iraq War, writing op-eds about it on Capitol Hill. And then we grew the organization to the point where we were the main spokesperson from 2007, 2008 for the surge and Betrayal and trying to turn the tide of the war. And then eventually supporting McCain in his effort to try to continue that. So I didn't anticipate getting political, but it got real political real fast because the war was. And then I found myself doing TV and media, which is kind of how I ended up in this direction. I mean, there's a lot more to the story, but in that immediate moment, I found myself as an advocate for an unpopular war, and it was another chapter of the fight. It was like, I'm not fighting over there, I'm going to fight over here.
What was your last tour to?
My last tour was Afghanistan.
Okay.
So then I went to, what happened after that? Then I went to grad school, and then in the middle of grad school, my Guard unit was mobilized, and we went to Afghanistan. I was a senior counterinsurgency instructor in Kabul at a small base, and our job was to train all the units coming in. So if you're an American unit or a NATO unit or even Afghans, and you're about to take over a battle space, meaning a certain part of the country, you come to our training academy, and we kind of give you the latest and greatest on here's what the Taliban's doing, here's what Al Qaeda's doing, here's what the new tactics are, here's what the population sentiment is in your area. So there was a lot of trying to understand the Afghan people, the Afghan tribal systems, the insurgency, and just give them the last kind of boost before they went into country.
What year was that?
That was 2011, 2012.
Okay.
So that was kind of part of the surge in Afghanistan. There's a moment there where
I was there in 2011.
Okay.
In Zabul province, so southeast Pak border-ish area.
Beautiful country.
Absolutely. It is. We had
actually is beautiful, if not for everything else.
We had this. Lived in this little mud hut for part of our deployment. That's back when we were clearing white space and holding. So the whole village stability operations came into play.
That's part of the thing we trained on.
Yep. And we didn't have a shower for a long time because we couldn't go down to the river because it was too dangerous to go get water. But we fixed that problem. And then
we fixed that problem.
You did.
Well, so I wasn't there for this story, but it's a great story. It's called Pumpkin Village, right across the river. And every time someone went outside or whatever, you get shot at. So on all four corners of a roof, we had I think we had a Mark 19, which is automatic grenade launcher, and in one corner and a 50 cal in the other corner. And then we'd have two snipers in caddy corner in the other two corners. And they figured out all the gunfire was coming from this one village, and they had pumpkins on the wall. So we named it Pumpkin Village. So we just took turns. Everyone took turns, burning that village, looking for these guys. And someone caught this guy, and he would take off that pumpkin, one of the pumpkins, come up and take a couple shots, then ease back down and put the pumpkin back up. Yeah. And if I remember right, the village was about like 700 yards away. So we put some steel, like whatever it was, 780 yards. We put some steel in the opposite direction, and everyone doped their guns in, make sure they're good to go for the shot. And someone was up there, I forget who it was, and that pumpkin came down, and he came up and got a case of Actrite. So it all worked out. But so really long story to talk about a beautiful place to take a shit. But we were able to move our burn barrel outside, overlooking this river, and you sit there, and it's like
peaceful.
We had a toilet seat drilled to a piece of plywood that was on top of a drum full of diesel fuel. But I mean, for 10 minutes, you can get some peace. It's just beautiful.
Sounds like a lot of fun.
Find the moments you can.
you know what I mean?
Absolutely.
But the scenery is gorgeous over there. It could be the next Aspen, but it's never going to be. So how long was that one? Was that another year?
That was a better part of a year.
Okay.
Yeah.
Good deal.
Yep.
And there was a lot going on at that.
There was, we would have a lot of political types coming through. There was a lot of an assessment of, because it was right before, you put it in the political context, it's right before Obama's reelection efforts, 2011, 2012. There's a lot of eyeballs on, is the war going well? Is it not going well? And the interesting part is I went to Iraq pessimistic about that war. Like, man, and then I left actually optimistic that if we applied the right strategy, we could at least have tactical success.
Yeah.
And maybe eventually that becomes strategic success. I went to Afghanistan optimistic, like, hey, that worked in Iraq, or it could work. It should be able to work here. And I left like, oh, this ain't gonna work. I mean, it's biblical times with AK-47s and cell phones.
Yeah.
Like, we're trying to create something in a culture that has no capacity for that. I mean, you build a school, they steal the air conditioners, and they're on sale in Pakistan.
Yeah.
You hand them weapons, the unit doesn't use them, they're on sale in Pakistan. So it was, for me, a wake-up call, like, wow, there really are some serious limits to what American power can do. There's amazing things we can do, but recreating entire societies like this is not going to work. And
I always thought it was interesting over there. I tried to leave politics out of it. I'll go to war with Canada over maple syrup if that's my job. I just love going to war, right? Getting in gunfights. I loved Afghanistan for that. It was the Wild West, the last frontier. Iraq, in 08 or 2010. When I was there, it started to get political. We couldn't do unilateral DAs anymore. We had to bring a partner force.
Yep.
And but then you get thrown into Afghanistan during the surge, and it was the Wild West again. And from a worse fighter standpoint, I mean, that's where you want to be. So it was a lot of fun. It was very interesting, but also very dangerous. It was all the IEDs, and I mean, it got bad real quick a couple times. But
for sure,
it was a good place to be as a war fighter in that, in the surge. I enjoyed it thoroughly. I learned a lot, but to your point, it can't help but cross your mind when you're over there. It's like, is this doing anything? Are we doing anything? Are we making a difference? Because when we pulled out and went back and retaken all our checkpoints, retaken all the fobs, it just created a vacuum. And I think that's going to happen for eternity. Well,
that's the thing. I mean, that was the most devastating. The most devastating moment for me in retrospect was when all of the bases, all the cities we had fought for in Iraq were overtaken by ISIS.
Yep.
Like when Ramadi and Fallujah and Samarra had the black flag flying over them. I remember just reaching out to dudes I'd been there with and be like, what do we do? We'll do something about this.
Yeah.
Like, this is bullshit. And it happened obviously in an even more dramatic fashion with Afghanistan. But those are things you can't affect in the moment.
Yeah.
So you try to do the best you can with the job that you have without I had to fight off not being cynical with all the groups that were coming in for their rotation. Be like, all right, you guys are ready to go. Here's your turd, and it's not going to work what you're trying to do because you're going to rotate out in 9 months, and every tribal elder knows that. So keep your guys alive.
So after that pump, what'd you do when you came
back?
back?
I came back. I finished my degree, and then I ran got involved with another vets organization, which sort of morphed out of the first one.
Was that transition a lot easier?
Yeah, because it was different. It wasn't a combat role in Afghanistan. Like I was an instructor. I mean, we saw some stuff. We had suicide bombing right outside our gate and I was the commander on the scene and there's stuff, but like not the same as direct action. But yeah, I went back I was in graduate school at Harvard at the Kennedy School. So you go back there with those pukes, like right after coming out. And they're like, let's talk about the dynamics of climate change and how it will affect the world. Like, you guys are idiots. So I didn't really engage again all that much. I got my degree and punched out. But after that, I got involved with a vets organization called Concerned Vets for America, which was focused on the VA. It was focused on freedom broadly, but more specifically, the bureaucracy that was the failure of the VA. And if you recall, it was 2014, there was a Phoenix VA scandal where it was exposed that whistleblowers showed that there were veterans dying while waiting on lists. So like they're supposed to get care, but they're covering up the fact that they're dying because the wait lists are so long to just get basic care. And we sort of were at the center of exposing that, blowing that up, and then making it a huge issue that like the VA should be able to deliver timely care for vets. And it got controversial because we took a view contrary to almost every other vets group, which was we don't care about the VA bureaucracy. We just care about the vets. And if they can't get good care there, then let the money follow them to a private provider in their community to get the quality care. Like it's common sense.
Absolutely.
But every vets group in Washington, the Legion, the VFW, the DAV, all of them hated it not because their members didn't like it, their members love it. It's like every dynamic out there. But it's the leadership that's political in Washington that's addicted to the access and the control and the money that said, no, this is threatening to what we do. So I was kind of back in this political arena on the vets front, and that led to TV and other organizing things.
How do you think the VA is now compared to what it was then in 2013, 14?
It's hard to say because I think it's backsliding a lot. I think the two reforms we fought for and got passed, and some of them happened under Obama and then they were accelerated under Trump. One was the VA Accountability Act, which means that any employee at the VA can be fired for cause. That was the idea. If you work at the VA and you suck at your job, you can be fired. Like anybody else in their job who doesn't work inside government.
Are they GS employees?
They are GS employees.
That's why you can't fire
it's impossible
a GS employee.
because they're government employees. But the public reveres vets so much that a politician can stand up and say, well, I may be a union guy, but these vets, we need to do anything we can for them. So if you're not serving them, you should be able to be fired. But the hard left noticed this looks like a camel nose under the tent of getting at all government union protections, which of course kind of it is, right? I'm fine with that as someone who thinks government unions are unconstitutional and shouldn't exist anyway. But it was focused on the VA, and we got it passed. Of course, the VA hates to use it because they don't want to set the precedent that they would actually hold people accountable inside government. And then the other one was the veterans, it's called choice. And it was the idea that the dollars follow the vets. You force the VA, if you live a certain amount of miles away from a VA facility, or you have to wait a certain amount of time, usually over 2 weeks or over a month, then you qualify to take your dollars and go to a private provider. It's called community care. And that has exploded and become wildly popular since that was passed. That was under Trump and pushed it hard. And vets have used it. They're like, I don't have to go 5 hours to this VA facility where I sit and wait in the lobby for 3 days. I can go to my local doc and the dollars follow me, and I get care consistently from the same doc instead of different docs every time. Done. I'll take it. And so it's been very popular. But I was actually randomly, I was up for VA secretary under Trump. So he considered me. I went to Trump Tower multiple times and met with him about it. And I remember him kind of saying, it's down to the last two and you're one of the last two. And he called me and he goes, Pete, I want to pick you. I want to pick you. But tell me this. Why do all the vets groups hate you? And I'm like, well, sir, for all the reasons I told you, they want to defend the bureaucracy and the system. And it turned out to be wildly popular. The VA under Trump did fire a lot of underperforming people, but still, the deep state is a real thing in any bureaucracy. And so they held on for dear life inside that. And then, of course, Biden comes in, wipes it clean. And now they've been there's more information every day. They're trying to squash community care. They're doing everything they can to kind of pull vets back into the facilities because they want the dollars, they want the justification, they want the traffic. And it's about the VA and not the veteran. So hopefully if Trump wins, that a lot of that stuff can be reversed. So how is it right now? I think it's backsliding, but it had improved a decent amount.
One of my dear friends I did a couple platoons with is Morgan Luttrell.
Yep.
And I know he's fighting tooth and nail
Big
for
time.
everything he can. And I was talking to Johnny Jones last week, and he mentioned that there's serious talk or it might be happening. I don't know if you have any insight on this, on the use of psychedelics for veterans while they're in active duty status. I can't remember if you said post or probably, I assume post-military. Because,
I think that's the only context I've heard it in.
Okay, gotcha.
But I have heard from Morgan, from Joey, from others that, think about it, it's a concept that also wouldn't be received very, very well by an institution that pushes pain pills on vets, but it has been floated and I think properly tested and seen to have a positive effect for enough guys. And then you get advocates like Morgan out there, who's an elected congressman, who's been through all of it, gets every side of it, and can say, I know this stuff has a benefit for guys.
I've never done it, but I've seen some of my dear friends I've known a long time go and do these treatments and come back a different person. And it wasn't lasted a week. And
there's a lot of research
term
behind it. There's a lot of hockey players that are getting into the TBI stuff and, using mushrooms and psychedelic of just those neurons and getting all those pathways unblocked. And
is it becoming a thing for in the NFL world yet?
Not really. Not that I've heard of. NFLPA doesn't. They're like the VA. It's brutal.
I didn't realize that.
Oh, it's really bad. Huh. Well, there's the injury rate's so high. I think most sports. I think pretty sure that hockey, baseball, basketball, they get health insurance for life. I think after you're in for 3 years, you get it for 5 years after you're done playing, and you're on your own.
That's it.
Really? And they make it damn near impossible to get money. Zach.
Yeah,
Zach Miller.
Tell him Zach's story real quick. One of our friends hurt his leg really bad during a game.
Yeah, dislocated it. Severed that artery. So he almost lost his leg by 2 minutes. The doctors there were on top of it. Could barely walk. Afterwards, and this was going on for 2 years of rehab. He was going through the NFLPA, and they doctor after doctor after doctor telling him, probably not going to give you money. I think it took him 2 years of fighting the NFLPA to finally get disability, and get the money that he deserved.
And his foot, he still has a dead
Doesn't
foot.
surprise me.
He still has to drag it. And I think he said he's still at some sort of risk of possibly losing it down the road.
Yeah.
Wow.
Yeah. And, it's horrible.
And then, them recognizing concussions and, brain injuries and stuff like that. They're
They talk a good game about it.
Oh,
I
yeah.
feel like.
Oh, yes.
It's like everything else. I mean, what am I talking
Absolutely. They crushed that part of it.
about? They do. They crush the press releases.
Exactly. And they'll go do all their own specific science and come back and be like, we checked it out, guys. You're going to be fine. Just keep doing your thing.
Rub some dirt on it. Yeah.
What's up, guys? Sam Mackey here. I want to tell you about today's sponsor, Spartan Forge. Spartan Forge has no doubt made me a more effective and efficient hunter. Spartan Forge was founded by former U.S. Special Operations Intelligence Officer Bill Thompson, who took his 21 years of military experience fighting the global war on terror and applied his learnings to his true love, whitetail hunting. My favorite feature on the Spartan Forge app is the LiDAR for finding draws and funnels. It also has an AI deer movement prediction tool, so you know when and where to go. It has historical wind plots for selecting stand locations, and Cyber Scout for just about anything else I need to know. Spartan Forge, a veteran-owned and operated American mapping and scouting company. Use promo code OUTSIDER20 to save 20% on a premium membership to Spartan Forge. That's OUTSIDER20, OUTSIDER20. This episode is brought to you by Code Blue Scents. Code Blue's famous from one deer to one bottle collection process is a breakthrough technique that guarantees the certified deer urine comes from a single deer rather than several, producing the purest, most potent scents. Check out Decode Unscented Field Spray. Their unscented field spray is specially formulated with medical-grade nanosilver particles to eliminate human odors. Easily suppress scents from pets, smoke, exhaust, and your own natural smell before entering the woods. Also, check out their new scent and scent elimination products. Check out PST, Pure Estrus Aerosol Spray. Irresistible doe estrus, now in a convenient, easy-to-use aerosol spray. This new formula allows you to apply the scent in short bursts with precision and zero mess. Simply spray it on branches, leaves, and more for maximum impact as you make your way to your hunting spot. Also check out Decode, Unscented Hair and Body Foam. This unscented, long-lasting hair and body foam is a perfect final step in your hunting prep. Just a few pumps distributed on your scalp and any other exposed skin rids away any unwanted traces of sweat and odor, giving you the competitive edge to go undetected by deer. Visit www.codebluescents.com and use promo code OUTSIDER15, that is OUTSIDER15, to receive 15% off all Code Blue products. Multiple use is okay, cannot be combined with other promotions. Yeah, I really hope that the government decides to move forward with the use of psychedelics for, PTSD, TBIs, or anything that it helps with, because I've seen it help veterans firsthand, and I think it's very applicable. And why not give folks what works?
Yeah, I don't know anything about it.
Yeah.
I think the name scares a lot of people away.
Oh yeah, for sure.
But if it works, why not allow that as an opportunity? If it's properly supervised or whatever that means, go for it.
Yeah, I agree.
Is Trump going to win?
I do think Trump. Well, if the election is fair, if the election is fair, and I say that not conspiratorially, just because it's an election of ballots versus voters. Yeah. And you got all these rules that were changed in 2020. Under the guise of COVID, they're one-time changes. We have to do this to protect the democracy and let everyone vote. Yep. And then none of it's been undone.
No.
And legislatures haven't done much to clean up rolls. And so you perfect a turnout model in 2020, and then you've got a dead guy running at the top of the ballot. You better perfect that again in 2024 and pour tons of money into ballot chasing. Because everyone talks about the enthusiasm Trump has. That's true. Like, people are fired up. No one's fired up. You will not meet a single person who's a Joe Biden voter. But they don't need enthusiasm if they've got a low propensity voter turnout model where for 3 months they go out and they find every single person who's ever voted for a Democrat in their life and keep throwing a ballot in front of them until they fill it out. Or, frankly, help them fill it out. Or find a way to compensate them for their ballot being filled out. And then you got mass ballots being mailed out to addresses based on where people lived or they rented in some of these states. I mean, you just got ballots awash. So it's going to be up to the Trump campaign and the RNC to be vigilant on that, prepared to contest those things, and actually fight it in the court of public opinion too, and then build as good of a model. It's not going to be as good as the Democrat turnout machine, but when you look at the state of the world and the state of the country, I mean, it's interesting. We're having this conversation the day that the jury's going to get.
I know.
That was the next thing I was about to ask.
I mean, I used to think that
we just go right into it.
I used to think that would be real problematic.
Yeah.
Like, hey, convicted felon Donald Trump, the folks that do the focus groups will tell you, well, it takes a certain percentage away from suburban women and different demographic groups. I'm not so sure anymore. I think people have seen through this. You can't even tell me what the charge is. We are putting.
I don't know.
Another one of my questions.
And I read it.
Serious.
I read articles like every other day, and I'm like, what the fuck are we talking about here?
My job is to know that, and I don't know.
I don't think anyone knows.
I listen to these legal experts, and they're sort of contorting themselves on. But here's why this is the first time in American history that a former president's future is now in the hands of 12 jurors.
Scary.
Right?
Yeah.
Ever. This is unprecedented. And those jurors are confused about what he's being charged with.
Yeah.
Like, that's the real damage. Talk about threats to democracy. That's the real threat right there. And so, yes, it's a Manhattan jury with a totally rigged judge. Like, what's the likelihood of success? It's really, for the Trump folks, really, really low. But I think if he continues to succeed in the court of public opinion, which he has, then the real jury here is going to be the ballot box on November 6th. And that's what's at stake.
So there goes my next question. So, because I don't know what he's being charged with either. So I was hoping you could give me some insight on that.
Give you a college try.
Go for it. I'll take the college try.
This is a bookkeeping case, right? Where the government is effectively saying you committed a campaign violation by logging all of these expenses as legal expenses. And you should have logged them as campaign expenses. Well, what if they had logged them as campaign expenses? Then I guarantee you the government would have said, that's not a campaign activity, that's a legal activity. So in either direction, they could have decided that it was an improper use of funds. So what Trump effectively they did was, hey, we have a bad story, we don't want it to so we're going to pay this person, which is a legal thing to do with an NDA, and log it as a legal expense. Whether it's his wife that he doesn't want to know or the general public that he doesn't want to know, he doesn't want people to know about whether it happened or didn't happen. But all of those things there are misdemeanors. They're all state level misdemeanors, all of which are outside the statute of limitations, which means you can't bring a charge. And so what Alvin Bragg did, he hung his shingle on federal election law, saying this is a violation of federal election law. So if these crimes happen in service of a felony, then you can elevate all those crimes to a felony level, and the statute of limitation no longer applies. So you got all these things you're charging him with that you can't charge him with. But if you enforce federal, here's the other thing. Alvin Bragg is a DA in Manhattan. He doesn't have the power to charge a federal election law, which is why everyone else looked at this case and said, you have no case, and passed it up. But once they realized, no, it's go time to prosecute Trump, they just said, let's throw the kitchen sink at it. And even as you follow the details of the trial, the jury instructions will be very important. And again, I'm learning all this like everybody else. How much does a jury have to know about that connection? It's still ambiguous. So the jury could go in there being like, well, it looks like NDAs are kind of shady and illegal, and looks like he could have logged it differently. And so we find that, he's guilty on X number of counts without making much of that connection. So the whole thing's confusing. It's all get out. And just insane.
Which is a great segue into War on Warriors.
Yes, sir.
Yeah. So tell us a little bit about this book. Your title itself speaks to me because I have multiple personal stories and friends that have been dealt an unjust hand from the big machine that doesn't care about you. Totally. And so I just wanted to get your lens on as an author on this book. Where'd you come up with the title, and what's the main premise?
Yeah. So the main premise, it's not a biography about me at all. Although I do tell a bunch of stories because, like you, they pertain to the topic. I've just seen in so many different contexts. I mean, the subtitle is Behind the Betrayal of the Men Who Keep Us Free. Of men, and it's mostly men, and I'm very clear about that. Like we always say men and women, but one of the lines in the book is normal men have always fought and won our wars. Prove me wrong. I'm like, of course, it's a fact. One of the things I was involved in during the Trump administration was helping to get some of these guys pardoned who were in really sticky situations. Some of which the members of the SEAL community will agree with or not agree with. In the case of Eddie Gallagher, you got Clint Lawrence, who was a first lieutenant. He was leading a platoon in Afghanistan, and the TTP of the enemy was suicide bombers on motorcycles. And it just so happened that there was a suicide bomber and motorcycle coming at him, or he thought in his first patrol, and he decided to pull the trigger, and the guy was killed. And it didn't have a suicide bomb on him, but was a known insurgent later on. They threw the guy in Leavenworth. Another one is what's I can't remember the other guy's. Good friend of mine. I'll remember in a second. And then some Blackwater contractor types. I just watch. Hey, we ask you to do all these really difficult things, and then if you make one mistake or we perceive that you make a mistake, we throw you under the bus. That's a small fraction of a demonstration of how our government treats these guys. But it's also the really scary metamorphosis of the ethos of the military. So that's the larger core of it. Really started under Obama, but also under Biden. This idea that we've lost our focus on meritocracy. The military ought be the world's greatest meritocracy. What are you good at, and are you the best at it? And let's put you in a position to work with teammates who are also great at it to bring lethality on the enemy. That's it. That's all. And that's what I feel like it was, 05, 06. Like whether the mission was successful or not per se, we were laser focused on that. Clinton had the don't ask, don't tell stuff, but people kind of looked at that and said, well, that's, not a big deal. If you want to serve openly or not openly, what do we care? But that was a gateway for the trans stuff that you see today. It talks a lot about women in combat, which the Obama administration pushed hard. I mean, I saw women in combat because we started forward support companies, which were pushed into battalions, and which meant you had women in infantry battalions, which normally you would never have. And they're running logistics trucks on convoys. Well, pretty soon they're getting hit by IEDs and they're in combat situations, creating vulnerabilities. That's one thing. It's a whole nother thing to decide as a military. No, we want women in 11 Alpha or 11 Bravo infantry slots serving alongside men in combat. What are the implications of that? And in the book, I can lay out some of the studies that were done and the way in which the politicians and the appointed politicians into the military just toss those studies out the window. So we don't give a damn. So again, we're always tossing meritocracy out the window. And then after 2020 and the riots of 2020, George Floyd, then you get the DEI, CRT stuff being pushed into the military, which is some of the most, and for this book, I interviewed dozens and dozens of actively serving members. So I didn't want to just rely on me and the vets community. Like what's going on right now, all ranks, junior guys, senior guys, enlisted, officer, tip of the spear types, mechanic types. Like what are you seeing? And overwhelmingly, I heard from people saying that the environment is one where standards are being lowered because of the perception of quotas or the perception of other priorities, and commanders and leadership end up walking on eggshells because everything's been inverted, that command relationship, for reasons of political ideology. And the latest manifestation after January 6th, which gets to my story, is the idea of patriot extremism. That that they're starting to dial in on political ideologies as a threat to the institution of the military. And I became one of those early casualties of that.
So how would you, I know this is a grand question, but how would you fix it? This bureaucracy and this, woke agenda that the military is taking on, and how it's affecting the war fighters' ability to, win wars and, the lethality of the military. What would be your first step, or first change?
Well, first you need a new commander-in-chief. You need that's willing to say this shit stops. We're not doing CRT. We're not going to genuflect for electric tanks. We're going to stop with this climate garbage. Like we want the best tanks, the best Humvees. By the way, all of our weapons procurement has been, these defense contractors, they build what the government tells them they want. And And so if they want electric tanks, they're going to work like hell to create electric tanks, whether they're the most efficient vehicles or not.
Yep.
So just all of that stuff goes. And then I would basically say, whatever the standards were, pick a year, whatever that is, whatever the standards were in 1998 for men and women on the PT and accessing, let's go back to those.
Yep.
If women can meet the standard, great. Then I'm fine with them being there. But almost no women will meet this standard for this school or this thing because God made men and women differently. Bone density, lung capacity, all the things that are real. And then you got to get all that crap out of military academies, which is how they're doing it. And then you need to fire a ton of generals.
Yep.
All these types that have been willing to go along with the woke garbage, because there's a great core of the military still there. These sort of 04s to 06s, meaning like majors, lieutenant colonels to 1-star types who've been through the wars, seen it, and they look at all this trans and this gender and they go, that's dumb shit. But they know they have to go along with it to get promoted.
Yep.
I think if you took the lid off that and said, we're not doing that stuff anymore, we're just that a lot of them could be promoted quickly and fill the ranks for these toady types at the top.
Do you see us getting out of this huge divide between the right and left anytime soon?
No, because I think it's an existential divide.
Yeah.
It's a divide of, first of all, it's a divide of God, of religion, of faith. Do you believe in God as what you worship, or do you believe in government and what you worship? Do you think men are perfectible through social change and government intervention and socialism and communism, or do you know that we're fallen and that there should be limits on government, limits on pride or not pride, but on the belief in what a government can achieve? And I think Trump has exacerbated all of it because people are so dug in on their views of him.
Yep.
That question goes to the book I wrote before this, which was called Battle for the American Mind. And it was about the 100-year takeover of K through 12 education by the left. Like the left has zeroed in on our schools. Public schools are government schools. And they're more and more command operated from Washington, D.C. than they ever were before. Teachers' pipelines, curriculums, teachers' colleges, everything. And so if you've ripped God out of school, he's been gone for a long time, public school. You teach America as, at best, this ambivalent project that's probably gone sideways. At worst, the bad guy. You teach CRT where white kids are skeptical of black kids. And then you do the gender garbage. We're in uncharted territory as a country. The experiment is, how do you keep a country while simultaneously teaching its young people to hate that country? You can't. No. You can't. And to hate each other.
Yeah.
So if you have white privilege, you should be guilty for it. If you're black, then you're inherently you're a victim and you can never succeed. Like there's nothing more toxic than that. And if you're a young child a girl who likes to play with trucks, you're probably a man. Like you're creating mass chaos, confusion, depression, anxiety, and you're pitting people against each other.
Just trying to create division.
You're trying to create division because division serves your purposes. And then you dumb down education because dumber, less free-thinking people are easier to control. Thankfully, you're seeing a lot of rejection of this amongst young people.
I think you are. I think it's definitely. I don't think it's turning, but like you said, you're seeing more and more people like going, that's a little bit too much.
Yeah, just like 17-year-old kids who maybe weren't taught it. They're like, I'm not a bad guy because I'm a man.
Yeah.
Or because I would like to have a family and defend them and provide for them. Or women young girls saying like, it's okay if I want to stay home. Or I want to do this. Like these were all normal things until 10 minutes ago.
Yeah.
and now we have to fight for them. So I don't know if optimistic is the right word, but there will be a backlash to it. Problem is the ruling class, the regime types, will use that cultural backlash as a justification to double down on their nonsense and seeking control, or look for a backlash that justifies the kind of clampdown that we see on, say, January 6th protesters. They're looking for those opportunities. And January 6th actually is the moment that I'm identified, or at least part and parcel with the reason why I was identified as an extremist, not because I was at January 6th. Well, I actually was at January 6th. I was there at the Stop the Steal rally for Trump, covering it for Fox and Friends. So I was there in the morning with a microphone, hey, and I remember describing it as a constitutional tinderbox that morning. It's what it felt like. You just feel it. And I've never seen a crowd that size. I've never seen a crowd move like that. And when they were moving toward the Capitol, it was cold. It was a really cold day. And my assignment was done, so I went to the airport. I was flying home. But that happened, and I was in the D.C. National Guard. So let me back up just one more second from that, because a lot of this pertains to that divide. I was in the D.C. National Guard. I was a major when the George Floyd riots of the summer of 2020 happened. So I'm suddenly called in, and we don't have enough guys. So as a major, they're like, do you have combat experience? Okay, great. Here's a shield and a face mask, and get out there with all the bubbas. And that was great, because I was like, I'm sick of being a headquarters weenie anyway. So if I can go out there and mix it up, awesome. And it was a surreal moment. You're sitting out there with a riot shield. The White House is lit up behind you. There's Jersey barriers and concertina wire in front of you, and your own citizens are throwing shit at you. And you're like, wow, And what I thought about in that moment too, and I mentioned in the book, is, 20 years ago, those guys, the Antifa guys throwing that stuff, might be on my side. Like, they just have a very different view of the world that's been pumped into their head, and now I'm the bad guy. So that happens. Then January 6th happens. And I remember after January 6th, they called up everybody in the Guard. If you were in the D.C. Guard or surrounding areas, you were coming to Washington. And I had orders. I host the weekend show at Fox. Yep. So I do Saturday and Sunday. So I had orders from Monday through Friday of the inauguration. Everybody had orders. And I was going to come up after my show. And I remember getting a call the day before from one of the guys in my unit, one of the commanders. And he's like, Major, stand down. We don't need you. And I was like, what do you mean you don't need me? No, we're good. We're good on people. I mean, they weren't saying that to anyone. That's like, Jay, we got a playoff game. Don't need you.
We got this, buddy.
We got this, buddy. Just take a breather.
Just stay at home.
Just take a pause. That's what it was. And so I knew in the moment, I'm like, something's up. Yeah. But he couldn't say, wouldn't tell me.
Yeah.
And so at that moment, I'm like, you know what? Fuck this. I'm done. And I put in my resignation on January 20th, on Inauguration Day. Went into the IRR, which is a list, and then I hung out there for a couple of years. And then, of course, after the COVID vaccine mandates, I'm like, well, I'm not doing that.
Yeah.
So I resigned. I'm out now. But I probably would have stayed in otherwise. Yeah. So when I was writing this book, I finally reached back out to that commander and said, what's the deal? And he said, well, I'll tell you. I know with 99% certainty, because I was involved in the emails and the calls, like there were members of the unit, senior members, who looked at your Instagram page and saw a tattoo you have in your chest of a Jerusalem cross, which is a religious symbol, by the way. It has nothing to do with white nationalism or extremism. Yeah. And W, an extremist, a white nationalist extremist. And it was after very little debate and very little pushback, all the command of the unit agreed Pete Hegseth should not be here.
Jeez.
So did the admin separate you?
No, they didn't. I didn't get an admin sep.
Yeah.
I just got my orders revoked.
Okay, gotcha.
So I got my orders revoked, which told me everything I needed to know at that moment, which I then got out.
Yeah.
There was no proactive action from them. But yes, I confirmed, my suspicions were confirmed. Was it about a religious tattoo? Maybe. Was it about the fact that I supported President Trump? Maybe. Was it about the fact that I worked at Fox News? Maybe. Was it a combination of all of them? Probably.
Yeah.
Was I a threat to Joe Biden on his inauguration route? Hell no.
Yeah.
So it's ridiculous. But that's the type of guys don't. I got an answer because I wrote a book about it and reached out. Most guys never know. On bases, they're saying you can't even fly the Gadsden flag anymore. The "Don't Tread on Me" flag is considered an extremist symbol. Really? Can't have it on your bumper sticker on your car. Like, we're talking 1776 stuff here is deemed as a patriot extremism. Tell me that doesn't come with a political point of view. You can't do that and push a Marxist ideology of critical race theory and say you're just, here to study the other side, like Mark Milley said.
Yeah.
This is a concerted push.
Oh, yeah.
The COVID vaccine mandate, man, that was quite the conundrum for a lot of guys, especially in the SEAL community. And a lot of guys died on that hill. And now, some of them got admin separated, and some of them, fought out long enough and now are reinstated. And of course, they're like, oh, you're reinstated now. By the way, we need you in a leadership position. Like yesterday, you hated me. Today, you're putting me in charge of a whole platoon. You know, and getting ready to deploy. So it's very interesting to see I'm gonna say the backside. But then the position that they put a bunch of folks in, I'm like myself, I'm sitting there at my 18, 19 year mark. I'm going to do anything to get, to this next, year and a half or so because of what it provides for my family. So if I have to take this, vaccine, I'm going to. And that was there was a lot of people I'm just going to shut up and row because this is the hand I'm dealt right now, which is so unfortunate. I didn't want to take it, but I also didn't want the military, which I knew they would do, is take everything that I worked for the last 18, 19 years.
Because the military.
Yes. I've seen it happen time and time again, which leads into my next question. You said you interviewed a lot of active duty and a lot of vets. What, story or vignette that you tell in your book that struck you the most? Well,
the story that came back to me time and time. Well, one was talking to a gay soldier who had been a part of the protests to overturn Don't Ask, Don't Tell, who pointed out none of the guys that were fighting to allow gays in the military are still actively involved in that cause because they all feel used. That it was never about gays in the military. It was always about the trans push more after that. Yeah. Okay. So because a lot of people genuinely like, hey, I'm not worried about what you do on your own time. If you want to serve the country, fine. But that immediately, and I had congressmen look me in the eye, Democrats, and say, Pete, there'll never be trans people in the military for all the reasons I lay out in the book. It'll never happen, never happen. Well, of course, that was the next step for radicals. Because if you're trans in the military, you're reliant on chemicals and things that you can never count on in combat. You're not deployable. It's like why people get their teeth pulled before they deploy, because you don't know if you have a dentist. I couldn't tell you how many guys left with a toothache because they just yanked that stuff right out of your mouth. Or why you can't use an inhaler for asthma in basic training, because you may not have that inhaler in combat. You need to be combat ready. Same idea. So just interesting vignettes like that are throughout the book. But the thing that came back time and time again, talking to people, was the lack of accountability, using Afghanistan as an example. Hey, if I lost my rifle, I would be shit canned or demoted, but we lost $86 billion worth of equipment. And not a single person was held accountable in the military chain of command. And the only guy that was Lieutenant Colonel from the Marine Corps, Stu Scheller, who actually spoke up about it and said, I'm willing to lose my retirement, lose everything, because somebody should be held accountable for this. And then the other one was the disgust and disdain for the general class, which the book is not about how the military went woke. The book is about how the military allowed itself to go woke. Because the ethos of the military is to raise your right hand to defend the Constitution against enemies, foreign and domestic. If you see something that's antithetical to meritocracy and lethality, and you're a leader in the military, you need to stand up and say, this won't stand. Like, I'm willing to throw my stars on the table, or I'm willing to call out my leaders and say, this makes us less lethal. And no one did that. And the troops feel that amongst their leaders, and they watch their leaders turn into politicians, and that pisses them off. But then there's also story after story after story about, I was supposed to do, my gunnery tables today, but instead we did trans training. Like just time and time again of stories.
I've done it. Yeah.
Check out Pete's book, The War on Warriors, out now.
Yeah.
Appreciate it, guys.
Absolutely.
And
what else you got going the rest of the year?
Rest of the year?
Yeah.
Oh boy. Well, just absolute chaos in the Republic. And covering that. I think we should expect the unexpected at every level.
I know. I think it's going to be wild.
It's going to be wild.
Yeah.
I mean, they're panicking right now about Joe.
Yeah.
But what are their real choices? I don't know. Chicago is going to be a dumpster fire.
Oh, yeah.
Because Chicago is a dumpster fire. Yet on top of that, all the Palestinian, Israeli stuff. Then you have a comatose nominee who you can't replace with Kamala Harris because she's a moron.
She's just as bad.
Yeah. But you can't skip over Kamala Harris because you're skipping over a black female, and that in their matrix of oppressor and oppressed, that doesn't work for their own calculations. And yet they know and then you've got their opponent is supposedly going to end the world, so they should do whatever it takes to defeat him. But the decision ultimately comes down to Joe and Jill Biden. And it seems like they don't want to go anywhere.
Yeah.
And if they don't want to go anywhere, then they'll have to run some sort of a modified basement campaign while rustling up domestic distress in the process. So I don't know.
It's gonna be fun to watch.
Debates.
I mean, it sounds like we're going to have two.
Yeah.
I'm surprised that they did that. That the Biden campaign agreed to that. It's a sign of how desperate they are. Trump's not wrong to call for a drug test. You can hype somebody up for an hour and a half.
Oh yeah,
if need be.
Yeah.
But they did that for the State of the Union, and that was teleprompter land. It's a whole other thing to go. Can you imagine Joe Biden in this conversation about his life? You could do it with Trump.
Yeah.
You can't do it with him. So
No.
what does a debate look like? I don't know.
That's, I thought about that with the State of the Union too. I just thought to myself, I looked at him, I said, wonder what he's on.
Yeah. Well, because in your community, and our enemies did that too. You can, in any capacity, once you get an understanding of what makes somebody tick, you can give them performance enhancers for a certain amount of time.
Interesting. Well,
good stuff, man.
Hell yeah. I appreciate you coming on, man. I appreciate your time. Is there anything else you'd like to talk about, or
no, just
anything you have coming up?
As I was thinking about this, like this whole military thing is very analogous, obviously, to elite sports. Like it's the idea, what the military is doing is effectively saying, well, we don't have enough white cornerbacks.
Yeah.
And so we're going to create a pipeline because we want that position to be representative so that more, and it breaks down the whole chain of why people serve. That's why you see a recruiting crisis here, and it frustrates everybody internally. Good people of whatever racial background
get passed over,
or they get the position and everyone wonders why they got the position, which is bad for the people who got the position for the right reason. Just all toxic and poisonous. It's one thing in sports leagues, it's another thing in universities, but it's a whole other thing.
This is life and death.
Yeah, this is like the Navy SEAL.
Yeah.
Now, the one thing is, I think the book ends with a letter to my sons. So the book ends, I've 5 boys, and it's sort of, would I recommend service to them? And one of the things I recommend is, if you do serve, go into an elite unit. Like go into the Rangers or the Green Berets or SEALs, because a lot of that woke crap is not in those units because it is so much more focused on, it's so specific and dialed in.
It's still there. The boys just keep it at bay.
Correct.
Right? And try to, navigate those waters as elegantly as they can without getting in trouble. But it's a saying like, oh, you're retiring. Congratulations on not being dead and not going to jail. It's a real thing, and shit, you've seen it, all the stories,
Yep.
I got multiple buddies that, were on trial for a long time or went to jail for a long time to find out later on. The Keith Berry example, I don't know if you're familiar with that. And he did 3 years and then came out that General Crawford, I think his name was, or Admiral Crawford, wrongly accused him on purpose because he wanted to take a Navy SEAL and burn him to make an example. And
100%.
all this came to light, and they just let him out of jail 3 years later.
And they know they get rewarded politically as a result of it, and that's where their allegiance lies, and that's the sad part.
So
no doubt. So no, I appreciate you guys.
Yeah, absolutely.
And Jay, it's great. I cheered against you for years as a Minnesota Vikings fan for years. So appreciate you.
Yeah, thanks for coming on. Check out his book. Check him on Fox. And should be an eventful next 6 months for you.
It's going to be something. Let's do it. Thanks, guys.
Oh yeah, appreciate it, man.
Thank you.